Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight. Ida.
Everybody, I'm Ida. I'm an alcoholic. Sober today by the grace of God in the loving program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, Dave, for having me as your first speaker, and congratulations to the chip people and to the cake people. I saw Sarah come into these rooms, and that's one of the greatest things of all, is watching the light start to come on in other people's eyes. That's my greatest joy. If you're wondering what this miracle is, if you're new, that everybody in here talks about, don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle's me. Okay? I'm it, because it's all about me. If I get nothing else, it is a miracle that after 27 years of drinking and not being able to stop drinking, I've been sober for 4 years and 5 months. That's a miracle. When I came into the rooms 4 years and 5 months ago, my body was broken, my mind was broken, and worst of all, my heart was broken. My heart was broken because although I had known from the age of 18 that I was an alcoholic, I could not connect the powerlessness of alcohol in step one to the unmanageability in my life, and I could not figure out what had happened to me. I weighed 80 pounds because I'd suffered from anorexia and bulimia for 10 years, which was just an extension of my alcoholism. It was just another good idea. My back and my legs were ripped up and oozing with pus because I also thought it was a good idea to rip myself up with my nails. I don't have any idea what that's about. I walked with a cane because I had neurological damage in my legs from the alcohol. I had a migraine that wouldn't stop. I had gotten us $50,000 in credit card debt. My husband wasn't speaking to me. Our marriage was over. My mother wasn't speaking to me. That's the state that I came in, and I was brokenhearted about all of it. And I was brokenhearted because my father had died 8 months before. And I had come to the decision that life wasn't worth living, and if Daddy was gone, I was going to join him. And I almost succeeded when I ended up in the hospital on May 9th, 2001, and almost died. And that night, I was crawling on the floor in a hospital emergency room, screaming at the top of my lungs. Later that night, for reasons which are way too long to go into, I ended up at a second hospital, and I was lying there in the hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, completely saturated in my own urine. Today, I'm grateful it was my own urine, okay? Hair and clothes covered in vomit. Again, wondering, what happened? How did this happen to me? Now, you're going to think I'm a pretty stupid person when you hear my story, and you'll say, well, of course that happened to you. And at first, I drank for the effect that alcohol produced, as the book says. And then, for many years in the end, I drank, as the big book says, for the sickest reason of all, oblivion. And if you look up oblivion in the dictionary, it fits me so perfectly, and I think most of us. It gives two definitions. One is to be forgotten, and one is to forget. I wanted both of those things. I wanted you to forget about me, and I wanted to forget about you. I so understood. I've always had this habit, or had the habit when I was drinking, of picking up one line and running with it. There was a movie that came out called Paris, Texas, and I've heard it's a good movie, but I can't tell you what it's about, although I saw it. But there's one line in there that the character says. He says he wanted to go to a place where there was no language. After that, I couldn't watch the rest of the movie. All I thought about was that line. That really relates to me. I wanted you to stop talking to me. I just wanted you to stop talking. Now, all of that, I think it's a pretty good bottom, at least for me. And I should not have ended up that way. It's very important for me to point out, for people who've had this experience and people who have not, I did not grow up in an alcoholic family. I did not grow up in an abusive family. I grew up with two very loving parents. Very little money, a whole lot of love. I was born into the family. 8 months before I was born, my grandmother was hit by a car and killed. And all my life, my family told me, we were waiting for you. This was the life that was going to come into this family. Everybody I know who's alcoholic says to me, oh my God, what pressure you must have gone through. But I was born in, people were waiting for me. I was raised with values, people who taught me to be honest, to respect authority, to pay my bills, and I was to have none of this. I was raised by this amazing father who thought it was important to take me out to the front porch of the house and teach me how to suck nectar out of the little red flowers that hung over the porch. That's amazing to me. Parents who taught me about nature and all of this stuff, and I was to throw all of it away. From a very young age, I understood that chemicals could do for me what I could not do for myself. I started taking sips off my dad's beer when I was 1.5. By the age of 3, he thought it was cute to pour me a little bit, and although my mother, because she's not an alcoholic and doesn't drink, doesn't know the word shot, she describes it as that I would do those little glasses of beer like a shot. And then come back and say, more, Daddy? And my dad was not an alcoholic, though. And I know this specifically because my dad was in the Soviet Army during World War II. The Soviet Army did not give you appropriate clothes and did not give you enough food, but they gave you weekly rations of as much vodka and cigarettes as you wanted. How cool is that? The American Army, however, had a lot of food but no vodka. So towards the end of World War II, when the American Army was advancing into the Soviet Union, my dad would save his rations of vodka to trade to the American soldiers for food. No alcoholic would do that, okay? No. You're not sitting in these rooms if you traded alcohol for food, okay? So he wasn't. I also used to, any chance I got, crawl up on the kitchen counter to get at the cough medicine, the over-the-counter cough medicine. I'm 45, and I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was something in it. I don't know what was in it, but I just remember that warm feeling and the effect produced by it. And you know, after the promises, and in the promises after step 9, it says we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us in the past. And I knew this as a 4-year-old. I would crawl up on the kitchen counter with a teaspoon because I knew if Mommy caught me, I could say, just one, Mommy, I just had one. And she did catch me, and that's what I said. It's the same thing I did to Kelly years later when he'd come into the bathroom confused when I was drinking NyQuil, and I'd say, I have a little cough, you know. And it went on like this. I really took off at the age of 13, though. That was just dabbling. From the age of 13, I did not want to go a day without a drink. And to tell you the truth, I mean, alcohol, I hate the term drug of choice because I don't feel I had a choice, but alcohol was my drug of choice if we're going to use that term. But I did a lot of drugs between 13 and 18 and beyond, because between 13 and 18, it's just easier if you don't grow up in an alcoholic family to get drugs. And anytime anybody handed me anything, I took it because I didn't want to feel the way I did. By the age of 12, I was convinced of 3 things. I was stupid, ugly, and awkward. and nothing anybody told me could have convinced me otherwise. I grew up with a father who told me on a daily basis that I was the prettiest little girl and the smartest little girl. Probably bad parenting because I had a sister, but I liked it because it's all about me. And when I started really drinking at 13, the effect that alcohol produced in me, I did not drink and feel I was pretty, smart, and graceful. It made me not care. I loved that. And the added benefit was I didn't care about myself, so I didn't care about you, which made it really easy to do anything I wanted to you until I came into these rooms. At 18, I decided I had two problems. I already identified as an alcoholic at 18. And for me, I came up with a definition. That meant that I had to drink. Now, in a sense, I was right, okay? But I did not know that there is another solution. So I decided I had two problems. One of them were these loving parents I had. They were a huge problem in my life. Because if they would just shut up about my coming home at 6 in the morning drunk and parking up on the lawn, my life would have no problems, okay? The second problem I had was UCLA. You see, I did go to UCLA straight after high school because one of the biggest things that I wanted throughout my drinking career was to stay out of trouble. Trouble I did not identify as jail. Trouble I identified as you making a comment about my drinking, because that meant I couldn't drink the way I wanted to. With, as a good friend of ours used to say, with righteous impunity I wanted to drink. So again, I wanted you to shut up. So at the age of 18, from a house above the hills, above Sunset Boulevard in the hills, I called my parents up and I said, I'm never coming home. And I didn't for a while. And I was off and running that year. I thought it had been on before, but there was nothing like when I hit West Hollywood. I moved into an apartment on Larrabee, just down the street from the Whiskey and the Rainbow. And I traded this loving, moral, decent family for another family. One was my best friend Diane, who admitted she was an alcoholic. Two was her father, Ronnie, who was in and out of AA and an alcoholic. The only person I've met who could drink on Antabuse and nothing happened to him. Okay? Okay, woo-hoo-hoo. A lot of respect for that man. And Ronnie was gigoloing off of, the final family member in this new family, was gigoloing off of this very wealthy woman who lived in the hills, who lived on Blue Jay Way, okay, above Sunset Boulevard. And, you know, every once in a while she would ask him to marry her. He would say no, and then we'd get a phone call, and I'd be drunk, but I'm the only one with a car, so Diane would put me on the phone. And she'd say in this, I have nothing against rich people, but it was an affected rich person's voice. She'd say, Ida, darling, could you run up the hill and fetch Ronald? I'd go weaving up the hill, get him, because that meant she asked him to marry him. He said no. She was pissed. He'd come live with us in the apartment for a while, which we all pretended that he was paying for, but she was actually paying for because he had no money. This is all I heard. You see, Ronnie was a very, very famous playwright in the late 50s, early 60s. Ronnie used to have a mansion in Beverly Hills. Ronnie used to run with people like Sidney Poitier. I never heard the used to. I was just like, wow, this is so impressive. I was not impressed by a father who went to work every day to put me in clothes and food and leave an honest life. I was impressed with this man who flushed every opportunity down the toilet with alcohol. And in that year, I did things. I committed crimes. Of course, I'd been shoplifting since I was 10. I say of course because I just thought every little girl did that. And deep pockets, Disneyland, Emporium, crap you don't need. Okay, stuff like that. But I started committing big crimes that I should have gone to prison for: credit card theft and check fraud and license plate theft, and everybody gets confused with that one. But again, I had an answer for everything. I had a good idea for everything. If I was going to commit these crimes, it would not be good for you to write down my license plate number. I needed them to write down your license plate number. This made sense. Again, I wanted to stay out of trouble. Telling you. I get it. I also became a prostitute that year, and I certainly was not raised to do that. And what I've discovered, I knew it then, but I discovered it more here in these rooms. The lies I told to other people were perhaps mean-spirited, but the lies I told to myself were far more damaging. There were the rapes that were not the rapes. I came up with reasons that they weren't rapes, because if it was rape, I'd have to admit that there was some kind of problem. It doesn't count, I was passed out. It doesn't count, I was in a blackout. And the sickest reason of all, it doesn't count because I gave in the end. I don't know if the men can relate to this, but there were the nights where I would say no. And you look up and you see that look in the man's face where you know it's going to happen no matter what. So I would just go limp so I didn't have to call it that. There was a friend I had, if we can call people friends like that at the time. He was my friend's boyfriend, Diane's boyfriend, and he was sleeping over. And one morning he crawled into bed naked with me. And I said, "Don't be silly." And he said, "No, you don't be silly." And I did what I did. I went limp. This was my best friend's boyfriend. And this is the sick environment I live in. I lived in, I tell you this. Because for a very long time afterwards, Paul and I made jokes about the morning he raped me in front of other people. He would start off lines with, "Yeah, well, the morning I raped you, those are the people." And I would laugh too. Now, I have no resentments of Paul, A, because I did a fourth step, and B, because Paul's dead. Paul was simply an alcoholic. And that's what I know today that's just how his alcoholism came out. Mine came out in equally heinous ways. I had no resentments of him. Somebody had the good kindness to call his parents in Kansas and say, "You got to come out and get him." And they made arrangements to put him in a rehab. And they were 2 weeks too late because someone found Paul dead lying in the street one day. I don't even remember what he died of. And his parents, instead of getting to take him home on a plane and put him into rehab, got to take him home in a wooden box and put him in the ground instead. Proving once again that you cannot, as the movie says, click your heels 3 times and go home. It wasn't going to happen for Paul. I don't know why I didn't end up in the street dead like Paul did, but I didn't. And this is the way my life went on until the end of that year in West Hollywood when I weighed 70 pounds and I almost lost my kidneys, and my parents took me home. But that was not to be it. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I cannot pick up another drink. I cannot pick up another drink. This is impossible. And I did. I can't tell you if it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months later. I have no clue.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
But I picked up another drink. And once I pick up a drink, it's so clearly to explain to us, in the doctor's opinion, the phenomenon of craving kicks in. What happens to me happens to 1 in 10 people. I pick up the drink, and my body said, "You're going to need more of this." And the problem is there isn't enough more. And then my parents became a problem again. So I did my next geographic to San Francisco, and that was no better because, as we say, we bring ourselves with us. And I went under the guise of going back to school, which I did. I went to San Francisco State. I went to my classes in the morning, and by 10:30, I was walking in Hamburger Mary's Bar and Grill, where my friend, Charisse, was the bartender. And by the time I sat down at the bar, she had, I don't know, I can't even call it a double Bloody Mary. She was my friend. It was probably like a quadruple Bloody Mary. You know, vodka with a splash of Bloody Mary. And she'd say the same thing, every morning, you know how we have the same conversations over and over again and saying, we'd have the same conversation. It was this. She'd say, Ida, man, I don't know how you can drink that stuff. She was not talking about the vodka. She was talking about the Bloody Mary mix. And I would say, but Charisse, it's got tomato juice. There's a stalk of celery. It's a breakfast drink. And she would say, Ida, you have to start drinking Cape Cods. That's cranberry juice and vodka, for those of you who don't know. Her theory was, and it's such alcoholic thinking, if vodka's bad for your kidneys and cranberry juice is good for your kidneys, then the cranberry juice will counteract the effects of the vodka. You've got to switch. And besides, cranberries are fruit. So that's a breakfast drink. If you're sitting here in your head now asking yourself, which one is more of a breakfast drink? Oh, I'm sorry, you're so asking the wrong question. The question is, do normal people ask that question? They don't wonder. Anyway, I didn't last long in San Francisco. I had experiences like I came out of a blackout at this club called the Mabuhay Gardens, the Fab Mab, they called it back then. I came out of a blackout with the lead singer of Black Flag standing in front of me with a switchblade sticking into my cheek, threatening to cut my face, with Charisse standing next to me saying, really, she didn't mean it. She just talks like that. She doesn't know what she's saying, blah, blah, blah. And I don't even know where I am. These are the types of things that happened to me. Came back to LA, went back to school, continued morning drinking, all of this stuff, stopping. My parents lived in West LA. I went to school in Cal State Northridge. I would stop every day at Sal's Liquor on Pico Boulevard for a pint of vodka because, you know, the professors made me nervous and the other students made me nervous, and I'm stupid anyway, so what am I in the university for? And the great thing that I used to do is when I hung out in the crowd in West Hollywood and we'd be sitting around drinking, I'd look at all the people that I was drinking with. This is when I dropped out of college after 1 quarter. And I'd say, I'm smarter than they are because I have a college education. 1 quarter at UCLA. Or I'd say, I'm a better person than they are because I'm a vegetarian. I'm healthier. You know. But when I went to college, I'd look around at all these people who I felt less than, and I'd say, yeah, but I'm smarter than they are, because they only have book smarts, but I have street smarts, too. Okay, none of this helps. But anyway, you know, life got bad again. I always managed to, at one point, pick myself up again. Even though I was drinking every day, I'd still pick myself up and move forward. I needed to get out, and I had dropped out of college again when I was almost 24. But I was getting sick again. I was 80 pounds again. I had no money. And, you know, worst of all, my parents were yelling at me. This was like my big deal in life. So I needed another geographic, and I found him. Some of you know him. He's sitting in the front row. He had 3 things I needed. He had a car, an apartment, and a job, and that was so much more than any guy I had, like, ever known, okay? Sorry, honey, I have to say it. So 2 weeks after the night we had sex in the front seat of my car, you know, Kelly once said to me after I heard him speak the first time at an Al-Anon meeting, he said, you see, honey, I don't say that when I speak. And I said, yeah, honey, because when you have sex with a girl in a car, that's called being a guy. When I do it, it's called being alcoholic. There's a difference, okay? So I moved in with him. If you listen to his Al-Anon pitch, he tells me that he asked me to move in with him because I was the sickest woman he could find. 2 weeks after I moved in with him, we eloped and got married. And the reason, you know, I realized I'd never shared this. We'd both forgotten this. The reason we got married was because Kelly was planning his own little untreated Al-Anon geographic. He was signing up to go work in Africa. And he said, you can only come with me if you're my wife, so we got married. I don't ever know what happened to that, but we did not go to Africa. But for me, it was like, all right, I'll go to Africa. West Hollywood, San Francisco, Timbuktu, Africa, I don't care. But instead, I moved in with him in Torrance, which seemed like the 7th level of hell to me. I mean, it was just like... And this begins a very important part of my life because, oh, God, I was so upset to discover when I married him that he did not drink like I did. This was a huge problem for me. So I started trying to hide my drinking from him. I also started trying to look like and act like normal people. This is important because it sent me into a state of denial that almost killed me. So anytime he wasn't around, I drank in the morning. And maybe from the outside it looked like my family was relieved. She's not doing the Hollywood thing. She's got a job. I worked for my cousin in a flower store, and then I went back to school, and everybody thought that was just the past. That was just a crazy period. That was just the past. Okay? And I continued on this way, and at 28, I finally graduated, and I went to graduate school simply because I had nothing better to do, like I did everything else. My advisor said, this is what you're going to do, and I did it. You know, one of my favorite nights of recent times was sitting with Jane at the Drifters meeting on Skid Row, and there was this woman talking about how she got her master's degree in sobriety, and she would never have been able to do that when she was drinking, and Jane and I looked at each other and in unison said, I did. And Jane said she would not have been able to get her master's without drinking. And that was my story, too. At Cal State Northridge, I don't know if it's still there, but there was a place called the Pub. And I could go between classes and drink. And it was the first time I made a decision that this group of people that I was making friends with were not going to know that I was an alcoholic. And I could hide this because there was one in our bunch, Patrick, who was an admitted alcoholic. He was in and out of AA for years. So Patrick was the alcoholic. And he was just that much sloppier than I was and just that much meaner than I was that I could hide my alcoholism. Nobody noticed that I was matching him drink for drink. For example, I may have thrown up in your toilet, but Patrick peed on your rugs. Okay? I also hated having Patrick around because the first time he changed, he was somebody who was telling me my definition of an alcoholic was not true. My definition of an alcoholic, as I told you, was someone who had to drink. Because he was in and out of AA, he was showing me that no, if you're an alcoholic, you can't drink. I didn't like that, not one bit. Life went on like this. My life with Kelly was not good. No, okay. We fought and we screamed and we yelled, and he started coming home later and later from work, hoping that I would be passed out on the couch. He would call in sick for me. He would call in sick himself to nurse me through hangovers. And it's sick, okay? And I started saying things like this, and this is the logic of the alcoholic. It became a point where there would be some days when I would drink and drink and drink and drink and could not get drunk. Could not get drunk. So I'd say to myself, I can clearly handle my liquor. I must not be an alcoholic. Then the very next night, I would get drunk, throw up, black out, pass out, be sick for days with a hangover. And then I'd say, I must not be an alcoholic because clearly I can't handle my liquor. Whatever situation came up, I would try to convince myself I was not an alcoholic, although at 18 I knew in my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. But I did not want to be. Until that time when I ended up in the hospital like that. And through the grace of God, a few things happened that I don't believe today I would have been able to get sober. Kelly and my mother were really, really angry with me. And at first my attitude, I'm lying there in bed and I'm like, yeah, this is great. I'm not feeling well. I almost just died and they're mad at me. And then I went, and then I went, oh, they're mad at me. Oh, okay. 2, on the 3rd day of my hospital stay, my psychiatrist walked in and he said, Ida, I've had it with you. And I'm like, no, he's not talking to me like that, okay? He said, you have 2 choices and only 2 choices. Okay, you have to listen carefully because they're not really choices, okay? They're choices we get in rooms like this. Choice 1 was a 5150, and if you haven't been honored with that, that's a court-ordered psychiatric lockup. When I came into rehab, they diagnosed me as psychotic, okay? Choice 2 was to go into an outpatient psychiatric program. From there, they discovered my problem very quickly, and they sent me to rehab. And the insanity of our disease is I'm sitting there in rehab, and the counselor's doing my intake and asking me questions. And first, I'm pissed, because the question she's asking me, I'm thinking, has she been following me around with a video camera? And second of all, I'm thinking in my head, okay, you know what? I'll do this cute little 30-day program. I'll get everybody off my back. I'll tell my family that they taught me how to drink appropriately. And I'll just go back to drinking. But thank God, the rehab sent me to AA, and AA took a hold of me. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, in case you haven't noticed. My first night in AA was a night that I hope you all have. I walked in the room hoping that I could sneak in the back and not be noticed, because I really just never wanted to be noticed. Kind of hard to do when you're a falling down drunk, but instead I was greeted by 2 people. One of them died, a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Another one is still a friend of mine. I was given a big book. I heard in rehab people say that you cannot stay sober unless you get a commitment. I didn't know what a commitment was. I am so grateful that I got stupid really fast at Alcoholics Anonymous, and I let go of everybody telling me all my life how smart I am. I went up to the secretary and I asked for a commitment, although I didn't know what it was, and he gave me a greeting commitment. And the next week when I said to him, I'm sorry, you gave me the commitment to greet, I don't have any idea what that means. This man did not make fun of me. He step by step showed me how to greet. That's what we get here. Love and tolerance is our code, it says in the big book. I just loved that. Nobody ever made fun of me when I said, I don't know how to do that. I got a sponsor within my first week. I had commitments. I started working the steps. Another gift from God was, you're going to think it's mean when I say it at first. Kelly was sent on a business trip to Japan for 10 days when I had a little bit less than 30 days. That was a godsend. I believe it was, because Kelly doesn't travel for his business. This was totally a very weird thing. But because of it, I had 2 choices. My first thought in my head was, what am I, an idiot? I have 10 days free to drink. He's gone. Instead, I took your suggestion and I went to a meeting and I raised my head and I said, I'm drinking tonight. And they didn't let me go home. And they took me out to my first fellowship and I got my first sponsor that way. And I understood what Alcoholics Anonymous was. When he came back 10 days later from Japan, he said he felt like he came home to a totally different wife. And that's been what my program is like. You know, I always say that it was a gift that Bill W. gave us in 1965 at the convention celebrating 30 years of AA called the Declaration of Responsibility. I am responsible whenever anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of Alcoholics Anonymous always to be there, and for that, I am responsible. And I really try to remember that on a daily basis and act accordingly in these rooms and be of service everywhere I possibly can. Because when I came in, not only was I brokenhearted, but I was desperate. Desperate like the dying, okay? I'm as desperate today at 4 years and 5 months. I'm still as shocked today that loudly my head can say to me when I'm car sick and we're driving, That's okay. When you get to the restaurant, order a gin and tonic and you'll be fine. Now, A, I don't think anybody else but an alcoholic thinks a cure for motion sickness is a gin and tonic. But B, I'm always just amazed at this disease that at 4 years sober, on what my sponsor and I like to call a yay AA day, where I had gone to 2 meetings, talked to some sponsees, talked to my sponsor, and just was feeling good, and we were going out to dinner, that my head still says the solution to every problem, to every situation is alcohol. So yes, I have to do all of it because I'm totally desperate. Because although there are days when alcohol seems like a good solution to anything that's going on, I'm not willing to suffer the consequences. Kelly and I were not going to be married anymore 4 years and 5 months ago. In the spring, we celebrated 21 years of marriage, okay? I have a relationship with my mother today that's unbelievable. I go to work every day. I have friends like you would not believe. It says in the big book, you will not want to miss this thing, and that means the fellowship. You get this all if you stay here. Thank you for letting me be your secretary for the last year, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for my sobriety. God bless.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button. swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.